Jacob Reed sat in the small, sunlit cafe at the edge of downtown Boston, a resume clutched in his hand that had been reprinted so many times the edges were beginning to curl. He glanced at the time again, 2:47 p.m. His interview was in 13 minutes. He took a deep breath, sipped the lukewarm coffee, and looked across the table at his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, who was quietly sketching in a worn notebook with a broken blue crayon. She looked up at him with her wide, curious eyes. "Dad, are we gonna be okay?" He smiled, trying to bury the exhaustion in his face. "We're always okay. We're Team Reed, remember?" She grinned and gave a little salute. But even that innocent gesture cut deep. Jacob had been turned down from 3 jobs in the past month alone. And though he'd been a successful operations manager before the layoff, now he was just a single dad with gaps in his resume and a daughter he refused to leave alone with strangers. Today's interview was with a major tech conglomerate, VanWyck Innovations. He didn't expect a miracle, just a chance. The building was cold and impersonal, glass, chrome, and silence. He walked through the automatic doors with Lily beside him, her hand tightly clasped in his. The receptionist looked at them curiously. "You're here for the 3 p.m. with Ms. VanWyck?" she asked. Jacob nodded. "Yes. I didn't have anyone to watch my daughter today. I hope that's all right." The receptionist gave a neutral smile. "I'll let her know." They were led into a massive conference room, sleek, black leather chairs, a marble table, and a large digital screen flickering in standby mode. A woman in her mid-30s stood at the far end of the room. She was immaculately dressed, her posture stiff as a statue, her lips already pulled tight before she even turned fully. "Mr. Reed," she said sharply. "You brought a child to a professional interview?" Jacob stood a little straighter. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't want to miss the opportunity, and I didn't have." "This is a Fortune 500 company," she snapped, her voice rising. "Do you think we're running a daycare here? You're applying for a leadership role, not a janitorial position. This is not how serious professionals behave." Jacob's breath hitched slightly. He knew he shouldn't have brought Lily. He knew. But she had the flu 2 weeks ago. He'd already missed an interview for that. And now, this. "I understand," he said calmly. "But I didn't want to cancel. I've worked in operations for 12 years. I've led teams, I've handled crises. I wanted the chance to prove myself." Her voice cut through again, louder. "And what happens when your daughter's sick during a major product launch? Or when childcare falls through during a client presentation? This is not a charity." Lily clutched his sleeve, confused and embarrassed. Jacob felt the burn in his chest, not anger, just a bone-deep sadness. Not for the rejection, but for how it was delivered. "I think I understand what kind of company this is now," Jacob said softly. "And I don't believe I'd be the right fit. Thank you for your time." The CEO scoffed and turned away. And then, a voice spoke up from the far corner. Until then, Jacob hadn't noticed her. An elderly woman sat quietly, almost hidden in the shadows of the conference room. She looked to be in her 70s, wearing a cream-colored shawl and soft brown eyes that had watched the entire exchange in silence. "Amelia," she said calmly to the CEO, "that's enough." The CEO turned. "Mother, please. This is a corporate environment. You shouldn't." "I said that's enough." The room fell still. Jacob stood frozen. Lily peeked curiously from behind his arm. The older woman turned her gaze to Jacob. "May I speak to you outside, Mr. Reed?" He nodded, unsure of what was happening. They stepped into the corridor. "My name is Eleanor VanWyck," she said gently. "I'm Amelia's mother. I founded this company 40 years ago, long before it had skyscrapers and million-dollar boards. Back then, I worked from my garage, with a 2-year-old daughter asleep on a pile of blankets beside me." Jacob blinked. You brought your daughter to work. Every day. I was a single mother, too. My husband died in a car accident when Amelia was just a baby. I wasn't wealthy then. Just determined. Jacob swallowed the lump in his throat. Eleanor smiled sadly. Somewhere along the way, my daughter forgot the value of empathy. I suppose in building a corporation, she lost the memory of what it took to start one. She looked down at Lily, who was now drawing quietly again in the hallway chair. She's a sweet girl. She's everything, Jacob whispered. I can see that. Eleanor paused, then said, would you be willing to come back tomorrow? Meet my team, not Amelia's. I'm still chairwoman. And I think we could use someone like you. Someone grounded. Someone human. Jacob's eyes widened. I'd be honored. The next day, Jacob arrived early. He wore the same suit, pressed and clean, but walked a little taller. Lily stayed in the waiting room this time, a receptionist babysitting her with coloring books Eleanor had personally delivered. He met with a smaller group, older engineers, thoughtful managers, and Eleanor herself. The questions were insightful. The mood, respectful. At the end of the session, Eleanor stood and offered him a hand. Mr. Reed, we'd like to offer you the position of Director of Operations for our upcoming division in Cambridge. A salary with full benefits, flexible work schedule, and a childcare stipend. Jacob blinked. But, why? Eleanor smiled. Because when you walked away yesterday, it reminded me of myself. I once turned down a contract because a man said my child would be a burden. That decision changed my life. And yours might, too. Days later, Amelia, still sharp and proud, called Jacob into her office. You're lucky my mother likes you, she said coldly. Jacob simply smiled. I'm lucky she remembers what it means to struggle. She said nothing. But the next week, Jacob saw her watching him quietly as he spoke kindly to interns, trained new hires, and left on time to pick Lily up from school. She didn't say anything. But she no longer raised her voice either. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, Jacob passed Amelia's office and noticed her on the floor, helping a young assistant pick up spilled files. No shouting. No cold stare. Just, human. On a rainy spring morning, Eleanor called Jacob into her private lounge. She looked friendlier now, a wool blanket across her lap. I'm retiring next month, she said. And I want you to take over the new mentorship program I'm launching, for single parents in tech. Jacob's eyes welled up. I don't know what to say. Say yes, she whispered. And promise you'll never forget what it was like to need just one person to believe in you. He took her hand. I won't. Later that week, Jacob walked into his apartment with Lily's hand in his. She threw off her raincoat, laughing. Dad, guess what? I got picked to be the artist for the school mural. He beamed. That's amazing. As she ran to her room, he walked to the living room and stared at the old resume on the table. He didn't need it anymore. But he'd keep it. To remember the day he said no to the wrong opportunity. And yes to dignity. Because sometimes the right door doesn't open until you refuse the wrong one. And sometimes, in the quietest corner of the loudest room, someone is listening.